Welcome to PLL Talks, and we're today. I think there's going to be the special talk session between the 2025 Expo Osaka Kansai and then the Digital Catapult. So the today's theme is like the power of digital creative. So we are honored to have 3 guests from UK. The first is Aki Yabian, the technologist in Mars from Digital Catapult. Emily Sabej,
Hiya.
Commercial product lead in Mars, and Nicolas Fernando,
hello,
program lead creative policy, and then including a Dai Habata from 2025 Osaka Kansai Exposition.
Hi all.
And then me, Seiichi Saito from Panoramatics, and then also the PLL creator from Expo Association. So today we want to really talk about what we've been pursuing. What's the definition of a Cyber Expo? That Cyber Expo is the kind of idea like which we actually came up like after the COVID, and then also after the age of internet, that like how we can actually make the expo as a global kind of movement. So this is still the Cyber Expo is still the name itself is actually the tentative. So we have to actually define. So we've been having a series of a talk session with the different people from a different institution and different community. So I think this is going to be the first session that like we're talking like internationally. So we're going to have a simultaneous the translation trial today. So we're excited about like sharing what those do. So before we jump into like what the Digital Catapult is doing, maybe like we should briefly talk about like experience about what the status of 2025 World Exposition is. So the Dai, can you actually explain that?
Sure. Okay. So let me quickly introduce the snapshot of the outline of Expo 2025. So let me share the screen. Just a sec, please. Okay. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. So right. So again, hi all. My name is Dai Habata from the Japan Association for the 2025 World Exposition. So in my quick presentation, I'd like to introduce the overview of the Expo 2025 Osaka Kansai, Japan. So this page shows the total outline of the Expo 2025 Osaka Kansai, Japan. And the main theme is designing future society for our lives, which is broken down to 3 sub-themes: saving lives, empowering lives, connecting lives. And the main concept is people's living level. We hope the new technologies and systems will be introduced for implementation at the Expo site. The venue will be Umeshima, an artificial island at the Osaka city, the Osaka Bay. As seen in the map, the island is already there. And regarding the period, the Expo will be held on April 13th, 2025, and will be closed on October 13th, 2025. And the projected number of visits is approximately 28.2 million, including 3.5 million from overseas. So this page shows the organization for the Expo 2025. It's a little bit boring, but it's important. So the government of Japan has their headquarters for the World Expo 2025. The chairman is the Prime Minister himself, and the vice chairman is Minister for the Expo 2025. So we the Japan Association for the 2025 World Expo were established January 2019. This is the only offshore organization to plan, prepare, and manage Expo 2025, working under the direction of the government of Japan. And our association is composed of staff members dispatched from the central and local governments, as well as business community, which includes members coming from different backgrounds like construction, transportation, travel agencies, and trading companies. This is showing the detailed location of the expo venue. 3 airports, Kansai International Airport, Kobe Airport, Itami Airport, and Shin Osaka Station of Shinkansen provide very efficient and comfortable access from all over the world. So we can travel from the center of Osaka to Yumeshima Island in about 20 to 30 minutes. And this is the last page I want to share. So this is showing the some images of the theme. So the main theme of the Expo, Designing Future Society for Lives, aims at supporting the progress of SDGs set by United Nations. So the target year of SDGs is 2030. So the year 2025 for our Expo is an ideal timing to share and integrate all the solutions developed in all over the world. So it is also an ideal timing to start thinking about what we should do beyond SDGs. So that's it.
Thank you. Great. So hopefully the audience can understand like what we try to do toward the Expo 2025. And then let me talk a bit about the status of the Cyber Expo, which is a kind of new idea to install to this Osaka Kansai Expo. So I think we've been still having a big talk about well, we're gonna have a real venue and also that we're gonna have a virtual venue, and also we try to have Cyber Expo, because the one point of the Cyber Expo, which we've been actually talking with a different guest, we try to open the process of a discussion like how we're going to define the Cyber Expo name itself too, is that since we have an internet and we have a different method to actually make the community, not only the physical level, but also like the international level via internet or social network, different services. So we've been having like the almost like the more than 10 talks public, mainly with the Japanese institutions. And then what we came up is that as Dai mentioned, we have a theme, designing a future. But I think this expo going to be or we can, have the option to actually have a function like how we can actually trigger the action started from the expo. It doesn't need to be the expo, but the expo is the one chance that the global institution, including officially from different countries, the government can actually get together and then think about like how we should make the action toward the future. As SDGs is the main theme. And so we thought the Cyber is free platform connecting a real virtual expo. So I think the Cyber is like the kind of in between. So I think that you've been the Digital Catapult doing a lot of like virtual platform too, like and then also like the working together with an international institution. So I think we can learn a lot today. And then we thought the Cyber Expo can connecting things, action, thought, community, philosophy as a platform. And then the platform over the border of a country and languages. So that's like we are testing out today. Like we try to install like the system to deal with like the different language at the same time, but people can communicate without any borders. And this is aiming like the expo where entire people in the planet can participate. So even like for you with a really low connection like the GMS or smartphone or 5G, like different, the platform or devices, like you can access to this. I mean, we're ultimate goal we're targeting. And then the platform where any scale community can coexist. So even like the small scale or big scale can coexist. And then we're not really thinking about like making everything by ourselves. It's more about like the cooperation or co-creation platform, like we're actually thinking. So the cyber platform, Expo platform, going to be the center, which might be the hub. And then we're going to have like several original contents, but we are thinking about be great opportunity to actually connecting the movement like you guys do using the Expo as a platform. And so what we're actually thinking about, the main theme of the Cyber Expo going to be the actual lives. And the 4 different themes, the communication and creation, sharing and matching, even like the platform where crowdfunding can be actually joining. So if you have an idea and if you have a solution, but if you have a problem, we can actually connect the dots. And then if you need to fund it, I mean, or maybe like there's somebody in the community can actually make the funding for the actions. So that's the idea of Cyber Expo, which is still spongish in a good way. So the next is they be great to actually get to know about what the Digital Catapult been doing within the UK and also the global level. Nick, can you explain that with the presentation?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us. I thought I'd probably start with a quick introduction to myself and then Emily and Aki as well, and then we'll get stuck into the presentation. But hi everybody, I'm Nick Fernando. I'm the Policy and Research Lead at Digital Catapult. I look after a lot of our creative policy, particularly when it comes to government engagement, but also when it comes to delivery of research and projects, and a lot of our startup engagement, which looks at mapping out what UK startups are doing, what their challenges are, and we figure out how we can help them through that. Em, can I hand over to you? Do you want to go next?
Yep, thanks, Nick, and thank you so much for having us as well. So I'm Emily Savage, and my role at Digital Catapult is sitting on the commercial team and looking after a lot of the immersive and creative projects that we do. So I'll talk a little bit later about that work that we do with business specifically. So really looking at how we can help industry within the UK, but also further afield as well, to adopt advanced digital technology. So great to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aki, do you want to...
Yes, hello, my name is Aki Järvinen. I am a colleague of Nick's and Emily's, and I work in one of the technology layers that we have in the Catapult, which is the immersive technologies, and I do research and development type of activities there to help UK businesses.
Awesome, thank you so much. I'll just share my screen with you. Give me 1 minute.
Yep.
Oh, whoops. Here we go. Is that looking okay?
Yep.
Yep, all good. Great. So I will get started. So before I start, we've given the intro of who we are. Again, thank you so much for having us. Japan are a really important partner for the UK, especially because of the expertise you have around areas such as content creation, AI, robotics, manufacturing processes. So I feel you're a company that we definitely look to as a company that kind of inspires us and shows us what the advancement of technology can look like. So any collaboration there is definitely something we'd love to explore. So going into who we are and a brief history of kind of why we exist. We were established in 2014. Digital Catapult itself is based in London, but we have offices in Northern Ireland, the north of England, and in Bristol. And we are part of the Catapult network, which includes 9 other catapults, each of which has a focus on a particular area. We are the Digital Catapult, but there's a catapult that exists called the High Value Manufacturing one. There's satellite applications, there's energy systems. So all of them have a remit, an area that they focus on. And the way we're funded is through an organization called Innovate UK, which is part of a government body called UK Research and Innovation as well. And the reason that it exists is to bridge the divide between research, commercialization for emerging technologies. There's some great work happening in the UK from startups, corporates, and academia, but sometimes they're not always talking to each other. So we can exist as kind of a neutral body to bring all those people together and get them collaborating and coming up with solutions together for things. Our main objective is to help exciting startups and companies scale and accelerate the adoption of their technologies. And we want to encourage more research and development and innovation in these areas. I'll go into some of the technologies that we work on as well. So as an innovation, as we're an innovation center and we try to remain neutral, so we support the government and the public sector. We work with corporates and industry to get them to adopt those technologies. We have a very big startup and scale up network, over 4,000 companies from the UK. We work very closely with academia to help commercialize the projects that they work on. And as mentioned, we have collaborated with the Catapult network as well on projects. And we want to bring in as much money for some of these growing companies as well to help them scale and grow. So some of the areas that we look at, so future networks is one of the technologies, so that includes 5G and the Internet of Things, immersive technologies, looking at virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality and haptics, artificial intelligence with a focus on machine learning, and also distributed ledger technology. We're looking at its applications beyond financial, where it's traditionally kind of been used, but we want to see how it can add value across a number of different industries. How we're kind of looking at applying these is, so we've mentioned the advanced digital infrastructures, and those 4 technology areas we mentioned, it's coming to a place where they can now converge and work together. And we're very excited about looking at how those new capabilities can look, how can they all complement each other and be kind of cross-functional. We're looking at digitizing supply chains. So that's looking at having more management across those, more transparency and better efficiencies. And then we're looking at virtualized applications, which is looking at the human machine interface and how advancements in technologies, particularly around immersive, can lead to new capabilities, and exploring technologies such as virtual production as well. And then moving on to that, how Digital Catapult kind of do what we do. So one of the things we do is we design and build digital facilities. We have a 5G test bed in our office. We also have our machine intelligence garage, which looks at supplying computational access to startups. We have an immersive lab with the latest and greatest immersive equipment in there. And why that's important to us is to open up access to companies to explore, play, test, demonstrate what they're doing. Not all companies have access to this. So we thought having something like this really opens it up and lets people design new solutions without having the constraints of not having access to the latest technology. Another thing we do is we design and deliver targeted innovation programs. So we have acceleration programs that help startups to scale. We provide business support, technical support, which some companies, they don't always have access to that either. So we can help them really grow. The other one is we work around convening and collaborative research and development. So some of the stakeholders I mentioned before, startups, academia, industry, we work together to try and access funding, to come up with new solutions, to commercialize them, and then show the all the benefits that advanced technology can provide, maybe sectors, companies, and challenges. A few of the facts about kind of what we do as well. So over 12 months, we run about 80 programs and projects. There's about 570 small companies that run through these. And over the last 12 months, those companies have gone on to get over £320 million worth of investment. And since we've been around since 2015, and that's been about £4 billion. So I'd like to think that's a decent amount of money. So I wanted to also talk about some of the international collaboration we've done. Emily's going to go into another case study as well, but the project that I worked on was working with UK India. So that happened in 2 phases. So 12 months ago, we spoke with the UK government about what we could do to help address some challenges around sustainability, net zero, climate change, and what in particular, what immersive technology could do in that area. What we suggested was getting together some of the key stakeholders. So that included UK and Indian corporates and startups to talk about what they could do to affect change and come up with maybe a way to deliver a solution. That was phase one. We presented that, put a group together and said, look, these are what we think are the main challenges. And we were given further funding to do a phase two, which was to create the Build UK India Industrial Net Zero program and demonstrator. So what that did was that allowed startups to get £45,000 worth of funding to develop a prototype or a solution to demonstrate in March. It's been a very exciting program to work on. It's currently running. It's been a collaboration between UKRI, the UK government, some Indian corporates, and a number of UK startups who are applying to gain access to that funding. But what we're excited to do is to see over the next kind of 6 months, what can we create and how we can really affect change, particularly in a topic such as net zero and climate change and sustainability, which is a pressing issue for everyone right now. And we'd like to think people are actively looking for solutions in this area. So we're really excited to how that's going to kind of turn out. We have the demonstrator for it in March 2022 next year, and we'll have solutions hopefully for people to touch and play with and see what value they can add. We're going to have a presence at COP26 as well in November, so we're hoping to have some announcements there around how this program is going. But we'd love to do something like this with Japan as well, to explore what challenges are most pressing in industry, you know, net zero, sustainability, creative, whatever it is, and looking at how really exciting startups can show you what they do and work together, because we find that corporates aren't always the best at speaking to other startups. So maybe we can help bridge that gap. That's my section done. I'm going to pass over to Aki to talk about creative innovation with immersive technologies.
Yeah,
Thanks.
one comment about like your challenges between the UK and India, which is like, I think you are right now at the phase two. That's exactly what the Cyber Expo should do. So I think, you know, we can definitely, I mean, personally, like, well, we can definitely corroborate with like something like maybe like UK, India, Japan, and then we're using an Expo platform, like you can actually engage with like the different countries, hopefully.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
We'd love that, yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Awesome.
So
Right.
Aki-san, yep, do you want to present?
Yes, please.
Innovation. Yep.
Great. So I'll just briefly set the scene before Emily goes into a bit more detail regarding one specific case study. So next slide, please. So one of the key things that we do is we run different programs and projects with startups, but also take part in, as Nick mentioned, the collaborative research and development programs. And one of the major projects that we've been involved with for the last few years is called Audience of the Future. It's a UKRI funded project, and our role has been to sort of support the demonstrators who have been building quite ambitious project in that. But as another output from the project that we've recently been running and launching is a project called Immersive Arcade, and this is basically an exhibition space that has sort of documented, cataloged the best of British virtual reality in the creative space for the last few years. So what we did in cooperation with Museum of Other Realities, which is a VR museum out there, which has housed many sort of festivals, for instance, from Cannes, and at the moment there's a Vancouver International Film Festival has works exhibited in Museum of Other Realities. So we partnered with them and commissioned 3 volumes of work from a number of British VR creators. So in total at the moment, in the retrospective where all this work is exhibited, there's 12 pieces of British VR in the creative space being exhibited. And actually, during the latter part of the year, we've been also touring around the UK to make sure that also people who don't necessarily have VR headsets at home, students and so on and so forth, have access and have been able to enjoy this quite unique experience. And on a broader scale, the other program that I want to mention is Creative XR, which has been now running already a few years and has produced 3 cohorts of a number of companies that have prototyped and explored, you know, really like push the envelope in the immersive art space. And this program has been run in cooperation with Arts Council England. And basically in the program, we give 20 or so teams a small amount of money to spend 12 weeks prototyping their idea. And then at the end of the program, we organize a showcase where the teams exhibit and present their work to commissioners, investors, and interested parties. And we've had quite a few successes going from that early prototype to actual products. So next slide, please. So here's just an example so that you get a feel of what do these projects actually mean. So the image on the left that says Vestige, that's from one specific space within the Museum of the Realities and within the immersive arcade. And you may see that there are avatars in the space. So the museum is very much a social space as well. And actually this shot is from one of the opening nights of one specific volume. And the other picture here is a recent success originating from Creative XR, so Goliath, which is a VR piece having to do with important topics, having to do with mental health and so forth, has been recently recognized in international festivals to great acclaim. So I wanted to give you those couple of examples what comes typically from these kinds of projects. Next slide. So beyond the specifically creative stuff, we do also then have programs that try to accelerate the immersive business in more general fashion. So Augmented is one of those where we basically try to support and catapult, so to speak, immersive companies to the next level. And the focus with this program, this accelerator in the past couple of years has been business to business. So that's just an example where we facilitate programs and support where doesn't need to be confined to the creative space. And then because we at the Catapult, as also Nick was outlining, we run different kinds of activities. We have a new initiative called Futurescope, which is kind of bringing all these different acceleration programs under the same umbrella, and especially tries to get at the cross-technology aspect, so that we are starting to see how the promise of, for instance, the immersive technologies is very much based on whether they can leverage AI or 5G or Internet of Things to create something better, like more than the sum of their parts. And Futurescope is a new initiative, is trying to tackle that. Next slide. And this is my final one before I hand it over to Emily. I just want to underline the fact that all these programs and projects benefit from the national network that we have, so that we don't just do things in London and we don't just do immersive, we do those other technology layers that Nick also mentioned. And we have, for instance, 5G testbeds around the UK. We have IoT frameworks and things like that, and also university partnerships. So all the companies and all the projects that we run benefit from these opportunities to sort of spread our network and test things across the UK. And with that, I'll hand it over to Emily.
Brilliant, thank you, Aki. All right, so I'm just going to talk for a little bit to talk more about the kinds of work that we do with business. So as already discussed, we have huge amounts of activities that Digital Catapult undertake with government and with the startups. But our third remit is really to work with industry to help them adopt advanced digital technology. So, sorry, next slide, please. So this is our industry vision, which is supporting business to shape and develop industry-ready technology solutions. And the way that we do that is through a unique capacity, really, that we have at Digital Catapult. First and foremost, and probably one of the most valuable things is, of course, the people that we have. So we have a huge amount of technologists that specialize in all of the areas that Nick mentioned at the beginning. So XR or immersive, artificial intelligence, 5G, Internet of Things. And so all of these teams are either from academic backgrounds or from industry backgrounds and understand in depth those technologies. On top of that, we then have our innovation and design-led teams. So they're there to really unpick the problems, to look at how to design the solutions in the first place, and to give the level of rigor that's needed to make sure that any company is going down the right route when they're looking at technology innovation. The other, huge value we have is our startup network. So because of these accelerator programs, like the ones that Aki mentioned, such as Creative XR and Augmented, we have this incredible roster of talent, and we try to pull that together to work on industry projects so that industry are not such a long way away from the original talent and new ideas that we see coming up at grassroots. We then have all this experience of running these types of projects, which in itself is never an easy feat. But how to deliver innovation projects, how to develop accelerators. And finally, we have those facilities that Nick mentioned, and they include things like 5G test beds and immersive labs, but places that are real physical places where people can get their hands on technology and networks that are obviously hard to come by otherwise. So next slide, please. So the type of innovation journey that we think about when we're working with big business is to move all the way in a handheld type manner from their initial exploration right the way through to them actually scaling up a new product or service. So that means you're going through several phases, and some companies are further along that journey when they come to us, others right at the beginning. I won't explain all of the bits on this slide, and hopefully you can have a look through in your own time. But it means that it's worked in a phased approach. And the whole point is that we're trying to reduce that risk of someone coming in, not really understanding where technology might have an application, with the potential risk of them scaling in the wrong direction. And if you break it down into these kinds of steps and have the real ideation, design, experimentation that goes on before that, with things like prototype building and proof of concept, then you can test out the various paths, work out what works and what doesn't work, and then scale once you're on the right track. So I'm going to talk now just quickly about a client that we worked with recently that was a non-UK company. They are the Munch Museum, who you may well know of. It is a museum based in Oslo in Norway that represents all of the work of Edvard Munch, who of course is the famous artist that did this wonderful picture, Scream. It is one of the largest museums of a single artist's collections. And they came to us, again, having heard about the existence of Digital Catapult, which didn't exist in the same kind of context in Norway. And they came to us because as a museum, they wanted to launch a new type of product. They wanted to experiment and look at developing an immersive augmented reality app for their customers, for a very specific type of customer, school children. But they did not really know where to start because they were very used to, as a museum, they're expert at putting together physical exhibitions, putting together even linear media, but not so much 3D. So they came to us with these kind of 4 areas. They wanted to launch this new app. They wanted to better understand how they even describe that challenge. How would they even put the brief out there to overall decrease that risk of putting out the wrong brief. And then, of course, to try and find some new partners that they could work with longer term to deliver this kind of work. So we went away and thought about how we might be able to help them. If we just go to the next slide, please. And this is what we came back as a project in order to tackle their challenge. So we said, look, we've got these things that we think are really going to offer a lot of value. We've got this ecosystem of immersive startups in the UK, and the UK really does have this kind of huge wealth that doesn't exist in every other country. Of talent, of people that understand 3D design, they understand augmented reality, and they understand how to put it across in a user-friendly way. We also said we've got this great technology team that really understand immersive, or XR, it often gets called, design specialism. And actually, you've got one of those experts on this call today. Aki is one of our lead design specialists when it comes to immersive. And finally, we said, we have an understanding of how to deliver these kinds of projects within the creative sector. And that's really important because, as we know, every industry works quite differently with how they undertake product management, and working within a creative environment, a museum in itself is quite a specialist type of operation. So if we just go to the next slide, this is how we went through a process with the Munch Museum. We worked with them initially to really scope out what the challenge was, to really understand it, to kind of interrogate it from all angles and make sure that the challenge that they wanted to put out there to the startups was the correct one. And then we did exactly that. We worked and we put out an open call to the UK startups and said, who's got a really great idea as to how we could meet this customer experience challenge that the museum has. And with that, we had said there would be a certain amount of funding to develop a prototype, which we would assist with as well. So then we had a pitch day and we chose the winners. And if we go to the next slide, you can see this was our winning SME, who are a company in the UK called Arcade. And they worked brilliantly, both from pitch all the way through to development. So we came together then as a three-company partnership. It was ourselves, it was the Munch Museum, and it was this very talented creative design agency called Arcade. And by having that trio, you de-risk the whole thing for the Munch Museum, who felt like they were taking their first baby steps. And the way we de-risk that, if we just go to the next slide, is that even though Arcade had come up with this brilliant idea, we wanted to make sure that we were putting it through its paces to ensure that the development of this new idea, this new mobile product, effectively, it's a new augmented reality mobile product, was actually designed and developed in the right way. So Aki worked with both the museum and the startup to go through this 5-stage process where you're really looking at empathizing with the users, really defining exactly what was needed from the feedback with users, ideating, prototyping, testing, and then going back a few stages if you need to ideate again, prototype again. So we went through this process over several months, and it meant that what came out the other end was a very well tested, incredibly highly scoped prototype for the museum to properly start engaging and rigorously testing, is this going to drive new consumer interaction from a school children audience, was the target client in this case. So if we just go to the next slide, and just a couple more here. So, you know, obviously we're doing this partly through the pandemic. So there was an awful lot of remote brainstorming and workshops and design activities that were happening. And it worked really, really well, actually. You know, we're testing out new methodologies from our side. And more than anything, we were introducing the museum to these very new digital design best practices. And what it resulted in, if we just go to the final slide, was a brand new prototype that enabled school children to really engage in this new idea. And I haven't gone into the creative concept too much, but I can send out more information on that. But the whole idea was encouraging children to be creative, be adventurous, and come up with artistic concepts in their environment through augmented reality, and ultimately to do as Munch the artist did, which was not to be fearful of things being imperfect. So it was trying to encourage children to embrace imperfection and develop beautiful new artistic concepts in their own space around them, and ultimately therefore engage them in the mentality and ideology of Munch, and hopefully encourage them to go to the museum at a later date. So just to kind of wrap up in terms of evaluating on the next slide, what we really brought in terms of the value to Munch. As we say, we facilitated a better way for them to work with creative agencies, which is a scary concept if you haven't done it before. We upskilled them in how to actually conduct very robust immersive or XR user research. So how do you test a product, an immersive product? What are you looking for? What are the metrics? We also then introduced a whole bunch of new workshop formats and methodologies so that they can carry on and do innovation on their own without that hand-holding next time round. And specifically looking at mobile as a service, product development, and how to drive that in a data-driven manner. And ultimately, we feel we've helped them to become good clients when they are working with digital and creative agencies in the future. So the last two slides, I'm just going to mention more broadly, you know, how is it that Digital Catapult likes to work with organizations? What kinds of things do we actually enjoy tackling with companies. So just on that final slide. So these are the broad stroke areas. So we love to help companies design and build prototypes or proof of concepts. We really like, allowing companies to go on that journey of working constructively with startups, predominantly UK startups, but equally we sometimes engage a wider field as well, particularly when we do joint collaborations with other countries. We of course love to help educate about advanced digital technology, so allowing companies to understand the potential, what it can bring. And then involving other organizations in collaborative research and development projects. So that is when multiple companies come together to take advantage of grants, research grants that might come up for a certain area. And then finally, we have even gone as far as helping businesses and organizations to design and build their own innovation facilities. So whether that's 5G test beds or immersive labs, we again will help them with the design and the concept work of what that means and how to actually engage. So I'll wrap up my little section there. I'm going to hand back over now. I think, am I right in saying initially back to Aki? Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, before going to Aki, I think Aki going to talk about like a little collaboration case studies or that potential collaboration. But I think that's like what the Emily explained to us is amazing, like in terms of like, how the creative sector is actually helping the industry to actually move forward. And then just one question, like, so in terms of like, we have a pandemic, but all the procedure didn't really stop, right?
The procedures of trying to work together, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was definitely tough. We originally started with the Munch Museum when the world was normal, and then suddenly as activity kicked off, everything changed. So, there was a whole bunch of workshops that we planned to either fly to Oslo or vice versa, and everything had to be kind of restructured. So, like every organization, I think we've become far more effective as to how to deliver really good, brainstorming and innovation sessions over Zoom calls and in a more virtual environment. And Aki certainly is the master of using lots of the digital sticky note boards and things like that to help with these exercises.
Wow, that's amazing. So maybe Aki can explain a bit more about that.
Yeah, maybe going forward, but at this point, I think in the interest of time, I'll continue with the next section.
Yeah, sure.
So what we also wanted to do here, because as invited by our hosts to touch on how we, from the UK perspective, and I guess more broadly from the Western perspective, we see what could be fruitful for the Cyber Expo to bring to the surface, and it really touched on also then that what do we see as the key future developments in this creative space, the technologies and so on and so forth. So next slide, please. So when we think about the future, often like the first thing that comes to mind, or the first word that might come to mind is trends, and there's lots of energy and time being spent on spotting trends and identifying them. But I would want to emphasize this fact that actually trends are something that is already happening. They are already here. And so if you are content in the identifying trends, you are already talking about the present and not really the future. But the interesting thing about trends is that they do have a direction always. They are going somewhere from today to the future. And then there are a number of forces that influence and impact that direction. So actually that's, I think, something that we'd like to see the Cyber Expo to think that, okay, not just 2025 and what is trend now, but okay, what is, if we talk about designing the future society of our lives, what it's going to be in 2030 or even 2035. So next slide, please. So therefore, we think that we should, or we are here encouraging the Cyber Expo to surface some of the sort of fringe stuff that is happening on the sort of periphery that is not yet sort of identified as a trend, but is the trend of 5 to 10 years from Osaka 2025. But also, as Nick said in the very beginning, we in the West, we do look to Japan to sort of show the way, or at least create something really fascinating and interesting, whether it's like the fascination with Japanese history, or the Japanese popular culture, or then something having to do with, for instance, processes like the Toyota production system, which basically is the fundament for any lean process out there that all kinds of businesses are adopting. So while doing that, and while putting up the Cyber Expo, we want to encourage you not to sacrifice the unique Japanese perspective that we've been inspired in the past. Next slide. And so when we talk about future, I wanted to touch quickly on a few themes that we find interesting at the moment, and which are kind of emerging and might be a bigger thing in the next 5 to 10 years. So I will touch a bit more on the term metaverse, which I don't necessarily personally particularly like, but it's just a word that at this moment is a very hot topic. It's a buzzword, and it seems to attract investment. So I think we have to address it to an extent. But the other things that we are looking at, for instance, is the so-called augmented reality cloud. So that this idea of a planet scale augmented reality network that would enable sort of persistent, very location specific augmented reality content, accessible with very sort of low end devices even. And 5G is a big part of that, for instance. But then going a bit to another direction, for instance, virtual humans. And so this ties to something that we know from different services and games and so on as avatars, but actually going a few steps forward beyond that to marrying artificial intelligence and aspects of our cognition as human beings, and how to make that into a digital virtual format to help in different areas of business, including medical applications, but certainly many creative applications out there. Then multisensory technologies. Now, for instance, when we talk about immersive technology, they are mainly at the moment focusing in our sight and on our hearing. So two different senses, to a lesser extent haptics, our sense of touch. But we do have also other senses. We have all the senses having to do with our moving around, our balance, like so-called vestibular stuff, but also, for instance, smell. And currently in the R&D laboratories of the world, there are interesting technologies that are trying to solve that. How could we distribute smell to homes in a similar fashion as we distribute sights and sounds nowadays? And so I do believe this is an area that will become more commonplace in the next 10 years or so, and that's would be something interesting to maybe look at in collaboration between UK and Japan. And finally, in a similar fashion, brain-computer interfaces are really like the next step in human-computer interaction. And so how could we control something basically with our minds? That's another sort of bubbling under a theme where there's interesting research and development going on around the world, and how could all that be brought together in an interesting way? That's the question. Now, I will touch upon the metaverse going forward a bit more detail. So next slide, please. So I wanted to use the metaverse as a kind of discussion starter here, that could there be something within that big challenge of creating, like, I will explain in a minute what I mean by open metaverse. Could UK and Japan play somehow a part in that? So let's go to the next slide. So there's lots of good thinking around the metaverse. There's also lots of sort of empty promises at the moment, and inflation with the term. But Matthew Ball is an investor from the US, and I think he's one of the best thinkers around this topic. And he has attempted at a definition of a metaverse. So you might have heard the term in connection with different online games. In the West, it's mostly Fortnite and Roblox that get mentioned. And the idea there is that these services are sort of starting to expand from the sort of their typical function, like providing gameplay and providing space for play, into housing concerts, for instance, for international stars, and therefore sort of expanding their repertoire of what motivates people to come to these virtual spaces. So with that in mind, Matthew Bollis has tried at this definition, which goes, the metaverse is an extensive network of persistent, real-time rendered 3D worlds and simulations that support continuity of identity, objects, data, and entitlements, and can be experienced synchronously by an effectively unlimited number of users, each with an individual sense of presence. Now, this definition packs tons of technology and challenges. So let's go to the next slide. So the key thing here is that even if we are seeing these sort of weak signals of the metaverse emerging, for instance, Roblox housing concerts and so on and so forth, there's still lots of work to be done. You can, even if within Roblox as a service, you can use your same identity and avatar across games, across its sort of a walled garden of services. You can't take your Roblox avatar to Fortnite or to an Asian online game service, for instance, or an entertainment service or a public service. And therefore, Matthew Ball has used this sort of a framework for the metaverse core enablers that you see here. So it's not just about that 3D content. It's not just about the networking, the platform. There's all kinds of stuff having to do with payment and delivering the content over the network and stuff like that, which no single company or nation can solve by themselves. And therefore, if we go to the next slide, so the meta, which meta means like bring something together to a larger whole, that's like the biggest thing, biggest challenge really. And therefore, in a similar fashion, when the electricity network was built, there was no one company that could do it by themselves. They required lots of different innovation in different areas to make that happen. And we are in a similar situation with metaverse. So you might be the CEO of the world's most popular social network, but you can't build at least an open metaverse by yourself. You need collaboration and you need innovations in a wide variety of sectors that are part of not your core business. Or you might be an academic who's making an innovation in file format compatibility, but that doesn't allow you to build the metaverse by yourself again. So let's go to the next slide. So this brings us to the idea that we need to think about the open metaverse for this to make really any meaningful sense, the whole word. So my idea is this, that there's no meta in the metaverse without interoperability. So while all these different verses and horizons and lands are emerging as services out there, they tend to be walled gardens built by one company, and their revenue models also tend to be built around this very profitable but slightly questionable attention economy that social media or free-to-play games, for instance, the mobile space, have made very popular. But for instance, I wanted to link to this recent post, an interview with Tim Sweeney, who is the CEO of Epic Games. He's one of the rare sort of thought leaders in this space that has been sort of open to this idea and acknowledged the challenge of the open metaverse. And so I recommend following and reading about his thoughts. But so the question remains that, is there an space, is there an opportunity for like an alternative open metaverse? And that could be something, if we go to the next slide, that maybe UK and Japan could try to figure out at least part of it together. And one of the reasons is that I still do think that the metaverse as an idea is interesting, because the reason that it has now gained all this traction and this sort of buzzword status is that when these things happen in services like Fortnite or Roblox, as Matthew Ball has already also put it, we can kind of feel it beginning. There's something there that we can see a weak signal of, and therefore it wouldn't be a foolish investment in trying to take this open metaverse philosophy and then start to think about it. Okay, how could UK and Japanese companies solve at least a part of that equation together? So I think that was my final thing that I wanted to say.
Wow. Well, thanks for the great presentation. I think you have a specific idea like how we can actually corroborate. And then, yeah, like, well, I started realizing that like what's the potential of Expo is, I mean, in terms of like corroborating or cooperating. And then also we have to have the aspect of economy and the funding too. Otherwise I start understanding deeply about like what the Emily mentioned about innovation journey, like how you actually make the process to actually distill and then like to make this sharpen the focus. And then like, you know, it's not just the hackathon or, you know, that kind of like the quick idea, but it's like, well, it have to be delivered to the society and having a feedback and then start, I mean, you know, there have to be like the utility, which is like keep developing to the next phase, I mean, as a platform. Yeah, Dai, do you have any opinion or amaze or any comments about the digital, what the digital about been doing?
Definitely, and that was huge. So yeah, thank you very much for introducing all the fascinating activities and their technologies or their ideas. So I was personally also impressed because I was in charge of Japan's startups about policy in my previous positions. So yeah, I also studied at the design school in the US until last year and did service design projects using digital technologies. So I felt very close to your activities. And I also appreciate Aki's words about without sacrificing their unique Japanese perspectives. Yeah, I respect the word. So personally, from the perspective of the concept of PLL, People's Living Level, I'd like the expo to be a kind of testing ground, testing bed for companies, startups, and creators from all over the world. And I believe that the Cyber Expo is one of the key pieces to make this happen while demonstrating Japan's uniqueness. So I'd like to create various collaborations to make this happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that what the Dai mentioned about the concept of a People's Living Lab, which is actually the business model concept of the entire Expo 2025. And then Living Lab should be open to everyone. And what I was always questioning about, like, when I was working on the Milan Expo, there's actually like a UK pavilion and Japanese pavilion. Those are like, you know, but it doesn't really corroborate each other. Yeah, so I think the Expo going to be like the platform to corroborate in a different sector, including the creative design. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That lots of the other expos, every country will come and represent themselves, but I think it is about predetermining, as you say, a framework for that collaboration before the actual event, so you can almost build up to then showing off some of the kind of output of collaborative activity at the expo itself. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, we have really intense session. We have like a minute to go, so we have to close, sadly. But I think what we promised, like, we're gonna have the second session with you guys to discuss more about like you know, the crisp idea, like how we can collaborate, because I think we can learn a lot. We can work a lot together to actually make the expo actually really worthy, you know, functioning to the global level. Yep. So, well, thank you very much. We have Nick, Emily, Aki from a Digital Catapult. Well, today was like the special session of a Cyber Talks, but we promised we're gonna have this next version. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.